You're welcome to the concluding edition of the documentary series on Africa Regional Conference Habitat 3 that we started a few weeks ago. Under the auspices of Federal Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Honorable Minister Babatunde Fashola. It was a huge success because of the quality of content, the quality of template, the discourse, and the quality of people that attended this international mega event. So sit back, relax, while we bring you the concluding edition of this documentary series. I remain your uncle, Omotaya Omotosho. The theme still talks about African priorities for the new urban agenda. Happy viewing.
During the 1960s and early 1970s, the world was seeing surging urban populations. This was brought about largely by migration to cities drawn by strengthened economic prospects on the one hand and the extreme poverty in rural areas on the other. This demographic trend was coupled with the introduction of modern medicine in developing nations, allowing for lower infant mortality and longer lives. The Habitat 3 African Regional Meeting on Friday, 26 February 2016 said it would advance global partnership to facilitate implementation of the new urban and human settlement agenda. This was contained in a communique tagged Abuja Declaration for the United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development at the end of the meeting in Abuja. The theme of the meeting was African Priorities on New Urban Agenda. The communique stated that it would harness the potential of urbanization to accelerate structural transformation for inclusive sustainable growth. The declaration, which represented African Common Front for the New Urban Agenda, was made on behalf of participants by Mr. Babatunde Fashola, SAN, Nigeria's Minister of Power, Works and Housing, and the chair for the Habitat 3 Africa Regional Meeting.
Mindful that sustainable urbanization for Africa encompasses a holistic and integrated concept of human settlements in a continuum which reinforces economic, social and environmental linkages across metropolises, cities and medium-sized towns to villages where most of the continent's population still reside, requiring a multi-sectoral approach which strengthens partnerships at all levels, including with non-state actors. Aware of the emerging challenge of forced urbanization due to, amongst others, conflicts, terrorism, and natural disasters, which has forced populations to move en masse from rural areas to urban centers and vice versa, and across borders, stretching existing infrastructure, resulting in increased insecurity and poverty, which need to be addressed in a comprehensive manner. We finally commit to promote the principles and the recommendations included in this Abuja Declaration for Habitat 3, ensuring that this contributes to the upcoming third preparatory committee meeting to be held in Surabaya in July 2016, as well as to the formulation of the new urban agenda at the next United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development to be held in Quito, Ecuador in October 2016. This declaration was made in Abuja, Nigeria and dated today, 26th day of February 2016. I take it that that applause is an acclamation and adoption of the declaration. Thank you very much. The declarations are unanimously adopted.
The Secretary General, United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, Dr. Joan Kloss, at the instance of Habitat 3 Africa Regional Meeting and focusing on national urban policies, urban planning and governance, Think National, Act Global, engendered everyone to key into the full actualization of the Abuja Declaration. As he put it, this is towards the Africa's final preparation in forging ahead with common positions for a new urban agenda, describing it as a paradigm change to improve value of lives for all.
This is a magnificent declaration. I congratulate you because it is full of content. It represents a very important advance in the way forward to urbanization, which is perceived and is understood as a tool for development, which puts in its front line the objective of generating prosperity for the people, which is generating employment for the youth, a space of freedom and capacity of action to women and men, and that really can address the huge challenges of development for Africa in the forthcoming years.
The communique noted the need to allocate financial resources to promote sustainable urbanization and human settlements development to drive transformation for all citizens. Professor Akin Mabogunje is one of the foremost experts when it comes to the issue of urban development in Africa.
I want to raise 3 quick responses to questions now. One is about finance, one is about culture, and the third is about time, or the dynamics of change. Somebody said, in Africa, we have open markets. Elsewhere, they have supermarkets. Well, they have open markets in Paris up till today. They were survival of the past. In Nigeria, we started to have ShopRite, which is knocking off a lot of our markets because we are changing. Culture is not static. The real point is our definition of culture can go in many different directions, but we are Africans. Just as Japanese are Japan citizens, and their culture still led them to produce. If I said Toyota, you know it's Japanese. If I said Buick, you know it's American. If I said they all put their culture there in a way you can't appreciate it easily. If you look at Nigeria, we change. If you look at any country in Africa, polygamy used to be an accepted practice. Okay, you can still try it, but in that way of knocking you off your economic.
I have with me a very dynamic lady. She is Techua Menu, a Ghanaian, but works with the United Nations. Well, how do you think we can combat the issue of slum? Because the issue of slum amidst urbanization quest was also discussed.
We played an active role in fashioning the common African position for Habitat 3 because we believe that Africa needs to own its own agenda. We need to move away from this narrative of seeing Africa only as rural to embracing urbanization, which has huge potential if it is properly harnessed. I think that for a very long time, when I spoke, I mentioned the anti-urban bias, you know, and I think that urbanization is unstoppable. We're currently at 40%, you know, but we have room to grow. We have room to correct some of the problems. But in the next 20 to 30 years, most of Africa will be urbanized, you know, and we need to take advantage of it. We've been mentioning the advantages, the agglomeration, the fact that even now, urban areas contribute quite a lot to the GDP in our countries, up to 55%. 5%. So how can we harness the benefits of urbanization? Habitat 2, Africa was still very rural. But now we have an advantage, and like Professor Mabugunje was saying,
Habitat 3 Africa has also profiled with very high rating, ready to enhance capacity building, skills and technology transfer for sustainable urban and human settlements planning and management. The communique stated the need for promoting green building and infrastructure technologies and application of designs which mitigated climate change and adapted to its impact, including urban heat island effect.
We are convinced that youth inclusion in the new urban agenda is fundamental, and that the desired urban future cannot be achieved without the creativity, energies, and talented young people across this African continent. We are appreciative of the strides that African governments have made in encompassing internet connectivity and other technological innovations. However, there are inconsistencies in the level of access and the quality of the information, communication, and technology infrastructure. We also observe that some African leaders can be manipulative of youth vulnerabilities as a result of structural injustices, thereby compelling young people to engage in violence extremism. We acknowledge the importance of public spaces, for example, the one-stop youth center model for sustainable urban development, post-conflict youth centers, and safe spaces for migrants and vulnerable youth. And we're disturbed by the fact that youth cannot easily access finances and credit for small and medium enterprises because we do not have land, housing, and assets that can act as collateral.
In conclusion, youth should be at the core of the new urban agenda. As young people, we want to contribute and be part of the entire process. The conception, implementation, its monitoring and evaluation to realize the desired changes we want. We pledge our support and we look forward to working with government, regional bodies, development partners, civil societies, and other stakeholders to realize the new urban agenda.
This suggests that the ultimate strength of the Habitat 3 process and its outcomes will continue to rest on the levels of interest and participation that can be drummed up from a full global array of stakeholders in the world urban future. Any long-term impact will in turn depend to a large degree on the political will brought to the negotiating table in Quito.
All of us sitting here, what is the configuration and the role of policy makers, and what is the level of the interaction? Is it actually conflictual, or is it such that it is convivial and can achieve the target or the objective of policies?
On the theme, think locally, act globally. Then I have a few questions that came up into my mind. What is globally? Is it the European model? Is it the American model? Is it the Chinese model? Or what?
I mentioned in my initial introduction that there's a need to give financial autonomy to the cities, and I think that being also a member of the expert group on municipal finance, also that there's a need for us to look at what sort of legislations and policies that will allow cities to become financially autonomous. And currently, I think, as indicated, the story is not that good. When we look at the sort of policies that we should have in the capacities, I think the cities capacities need to be built, and the cities must be allowed to do or work and how do you call it, mistakes. And we should not say that they don't have capacity, but allow them to learn from their mistake and be able to develop the grassroots.
I know what those entail from my being a legislative person. Bylaws or subsequent legislation per se can either be regulations, bylaws, whichever nomenclature you give it. But they're basically used by either government or in some districts, local authorities, cities, towns, to create what I call, should I say, the procedural aspects of the main legislation. So for instance, if you have a legislation on housing, the bylaws will tell you about how much fees you should charge in terms of what acreage should be and all those things. Now that's the impact of bylaws. A lot of cities, a lot of towns use it to raise funds for themselves, to raise fees and all that. But they also use it to regulate society. For instance, a city can decide to have a bylaw that says every girl child shall go to school. If anyone is found not doing that, they're fined. So something of that nature. That's what I know in terms of bylaws.
Further, historical high levels of inequality are today being felt most prominently in urban areas, where 2/3 of people are thought to experience worse inequity than they did 2 decades ago. Habitat 3 Africa Regional Meeting revealed that governments were increasingly taking notice of the negative effects of rapid and unplanned urbanization. These problems included the growth of urban slums and squatter settlements, alongside broader concerns regarding chaotic development and declining quality of life. Such problems were becoming especially urgent in the developing world, where so-called illegal settlements were subject to frequent forced evictions. At the time, many cities in the global north were suffering from inner city slums and losing their middle class to sprawling suburbs. Habitat 3 will now offer a major opportunity for the international community to substantively engage with and strategize around these complex issues and many others.
We need laws that will create a lasting security of tenure, not short-term tenure. We want the government of African countries to begin to think of African cities, not the Western cities. We want the government of Africa to own and have ownership of their urban settlement. We want to formalize our engagements and stakeholders in urban issues by making sure that every policy papers have the position of the urban poor, the slum dwellers, the informal sectors. We want you to create space for us to begin to recognize, support our organizing. Don't see us as grassroots women talking. See us as partners with weapons. See us as people who can give you data. I want our leaders to begin to look at the data of the lives they have touched, not the data of projects they have carried out. We want you to begin to see, if we have 150 million Nigerians, this year, how many of the people have benefited? Give us data. We, the community people, will give you data. You say we do not have the capacity to give you data. No problem. Come and collect data of how many lives you have touched, not how much money you have spent. You say we do not have land titles because we are sitting on unplanned settlement. Who is planning? Who is the owner of land? Our grandparents have lived here for 100 years. And you say we are informal settlers. Who is the owner? Who is a thief? Who is a dweller? You see the multilateral agencies from China, from everywhere, that grab your land for shopping mall, that has the right to land title. Or we that we've lived here for 100 years. Think about this.
I have the pleasure of speaking with Honorable Minister of State, Mustapha Baba Shebri. You're welcome, Honorable Minister. We are hosting the Habitat 3 Africa regional meeting. What does this mean to you? It's a big international event, and I'm sure it means a lot to you.
Yeah, it means a lot to every one of us that is here. It means reconciling between the modern urbanization that we have and Africa coming of age to sit down, discuss, and bring in, all relevant stakeholders. You had the woman talking about women that are left behind. You have those that are talking of the youth that are left behind.
Yes.
You have the village people. Somebody talking about the village, the rural dwellers.
Yeah, and the slum.
So it's a platform to bring about these two schools of thought. The rural school of thought and those that are with the urban school of thought. It will give us as leaders, or give us more information as to how to go about when making decisions.
I have with me an elder statesman, well respected in the polity, still very, very active and dynamic, our very own Professor Mapo Ogunje. Prof, good to see you again, sir.
Nice to see you.
How are you today, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
Can you give us an overview, a summary of your paper presentation, the voice you're trying to lend to this course?
The issue in which I was involved was the one reminding us that different countries might have policies, they might have planning modules, they might have governance system.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they have a lot to learn from the global. And so we ended up appreciating that we are not an island to ourselves. And because urbanization is a new but growing phenomena, we will do well to appreciate what other countries have done.
The upcoming conference will seek to ensure broad input into the creation of what's being referred to as the New Urban Agenda. As yet, this is a concept that remains to be clearly defined. Nonetheless, the timing for such a broad goal seems tied to historic levels in popular interest worldwide, fused with prospects of strong participation from throughout the rest of the UN and broader multilateral systems. Further, according to principles that supporters hope to see embodied in the New Urban Agenda, the results will empower both civil society and government authorities at all levels.
I have with me His Excellency, the Ambassador from Ecuador here in Nigeria. Here we are hosting the Habitat 3 Africa Regional Meeting. What does it portend to you? What does it mean to you? Your overview.
Habitat is a very important event, and the Abuja Declaration will be a very important issue for the global declaration that will be held in Quito, Ecuador. Because I am participant here because, as you know, the global Habitat 3 will be hosted by Quito, Ecuador, Patrimony 2020.
Quito officially offered to host the Habitat 3 conference in early 2013 on the initiative of the city's then mayor. Quito's bid ultimately went uncontested, and the UN General Assembly decided to accept the offer in December 2014. Quito has received accolades in the past for being a leader in planning for climate change-related adaptation, while the current government has put housing and quality of life at the center of its development approach. Quito's clear interest in historical preservation could result in strengthened importance being placed on this issue at Habitat 3. More broadly, the Ecuadorian government said it sees the new urban agenda as an opportunity to bring the views of Latin America and the global south together with a new international commitment to sustainable development.
Well, viewers, this is where we call it a day on your program Towards a Greater Nigeria. And I still remain your anchor, Omotayo Omotosho. For the past 4 or 5 weeks, we've been bringing you clips on the content of the Africa Regional Conference Habitat 3 that took place here in Nigeria. And indeed, a very, very successful conference it was. It happened to be the very first international conference to be hosted under the auspices of our own minister, Honorable Minister Babatunde Raji Fashola, the Minister of Power, Works and Housing. And with that, the African nations have been able to come up with a common front, wanting to speak with a common voice, a unified voice on the priorities for the new urban agenda. Come Quito in Ecuador, that is October 2016, and before then a stopover at Surabaya in July 2016. Make sure you join us then. I remain your anchor, Omotayo Omotosho. Thanks for joining us. Next week poses to be another interesting and enlightening edition. Have a good evening. Good evening.